Hello, my name is Theresa Alviar, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction. So today I'm going to talk about global perspectives, and I'm going to refer to the course Curriculum and Assessment, which I teach to postgraduate diploma students and also to undergraduate students. For me, I define global perspectives as a way of seeing an issue from different worldviews. And worldviews means that people are brought up with different types of input and different biases, different types of exposure to media. And so we have different value systems when we view a particular issue. A global perspective is an awareness raising that looks at issues from different national backgrounds and also different cultural backgrounds, and having an open-mindedness to hearing opinions that might differ from your own. Because I teach curriculum and assessment, I see global perspectives as being a very important part of that course. Because right now, in the 21st century, curriculum and assessment are definitely global issues. For example, we see a lot of compulsions for measuring student achievement. We have large-scale assessments like PISA and TIMSS. There seems to be this preoccupation to compare and see how students measure up in the world stage. These types of trends have very concrete implications for teachers, curriculum, and assessment, and the way they enact these curricular programs and the way they assess student learning. So it fits into the course because I want the teachers to be aware that although they have to implement a certain curriculum, that there are underlying values to this type of curriculum that they may agree with or they may not agree with. And so what I want to do is build their awareness of what they believe curriculum is. What is their role as a teacher? And how does their teaching promote a certain type of learning, a certain type of assessment, and their beliefs about how students actually should be in the classroom, how they learn, and also in broader society. And today, it also means that whatever they do has implications on how they understand students participating in a global community. In curriculum and assessment, there's one section in our course where we look at the global trends that are influencing curriculum and assessment. And so we talk about in the 21st century how globalization has resulted in societies becoming more culturally diverse. And this has an impact on what type of schooling there is supposed to be in societies. Should it promote an honoring of the different types of cultures that are brought by students? Or should it kind of honor the type of unifying patriotic type of cultural identity? So in itself, there's a tension there. There's another one, like I previously mentioned, about a more utilitarian or economically driven type of education, and how are examinations becoming more compliant with that type of agenda versus the type of curriculum that honors students' identities, their interests, and their abilities. So that's a second tension. The third tension comes from, well, it also comes from the nature of knowledge itself. So curriculum in a global world means we have to kind of question, what is knowledge? Is it something that is static and inert? or is it something that is co-constructed and therefore dynamic? So these are some of the principles and tensions that I want the students to think about that makes curriculum and assessment a really global issue. And that is one of the first fundamental components of the course. Aside from those three tensions, I also see that in my classroom, there are different cultures that are represented. It may not necessarily be international students, but I always come with the assumption that students come from a different type of home culture. In our institute, we have students from different countries represented. So for me, I look at that as a sort of potential and opportunity for them to bring their own opinions about an issue. I always try to make situations where they're in small groups or even in large groups that everybody sort of feels comfortable sharing their perspectives and drawing on their own experiences. A third strategy that I use would be called comparative case studies. In, in my PGDE courses, I encourage the students to look at a curriculum issue through a different national framework. For example, when they write an essay, I encourage them to look at, for example, assessment or formative assessment. How is formative assessment done in other countries? And I also give them resources to look at how these different issues are tackled in different countries. For example, some of my students have been interested in multiculturalism, and multiculturalism is defined very differently in Japan and New Zealand as it is in Hong Kong. So I give them resources to look at these countries too. I think that sharing multiple perspectives is something that enriches any class, any course. And so it's just a matter of developing the habit of not just being somebody who um, imparts knowledge, but also as somebody who is, interested to know what the students think and what the students bring. And that's a habit that I think I cultivated when I was a teacher in fifth grade, grade 5, because I could see that the students were very curious about, each other's backgrounds. And so I wanted them to have that opportunity. I think it's the same also in the university setting. Students are curious about each other, so we need to give them that space to exchange ideas and be open-minded to others' experiences and others' opinions. So these practices, I think, yes, are very much transferable to other courses. I think they learn several skills. For example, they have to learn how to convey and express their thoughts coherently to others. They have to learn how to back up their ideas. They also have to learn the skills of listening and preparing their own, what they have to say. Aside from that, they learn knowledge. They learn new knowledge that comes from, a different type of context, a different type of national context, cultural context. And above all, they also learn values. They learn values of being open-minded, honoring and nurturing other people who might even be different from them. And there's a philosophical principle called fallibility. And this is, I think, an important value. It means that students are aware that they're responsible for their own opinions, but they also have the duty to know and accept that there's a possibility that they might be wrong. So it's also related to open-mindedness, but I think it speaks to the type of responsibility that students and teachers, especially in higher education, need to have. So I think that is very important, not just in the academic community, but also as, as people in a world community. We need to be more tolerant and open and responsible for bettering what we know, yet being open-minded. One difficulty is that you need students, especially the older students, uh, are sometimes very, very busy, right? So they might not have the chance to go over materials that we have to go through in class. So I try to give them time to review their materials, go over and read what they've been assigned to read. But if you're going to have a meaningful discussion in class, to focus on the different perspectives in your classroom, students have to learn to acculturate to the fact that they have to come prepared, you know, to give their opinions, but also substantiate those opinions with evidence. So that means they have to read. But because of the students' busy schedule in PGDE, that might not always be the case. So I try to give them some time, when we're waiting for others. Another difficulty is sometimes the physical space that we have in the classroom. Having a discussion lends itself to people being in small groups, but a lot of the physical space that we have in the institute it's sometimes hard to do. So even something like that can kind of affect the type of approach that you have to discussions. Another one would be probably just timing, especially when you're teaching a PGDE course. Just looking at the schedule, it's very intense. So preparing, if you want guest speakers or resources, just preparing those types of resources can be a bit of a challenge. So you need to work, beforehand. I think we're lucky in this institute, in this university, that we do not have the challenge of people with closed minds, because that is usually what is the biggest challenge. I find that our students here are curious and receptive to different ideas. They want to learn about other opinions, and I think that is a big plus. I think as teachers, we should have that type of freedom and the type of courage to discuss global issues or even local issues and explore different perspectives about issues and problems relating to education. But maybe that's one issue and difficulty that I see potentially, that maybe people don't want to discuss certain issues because they might think that it's too controversial. We should not take for granted that, especially in the area of education, of curriculum and assessment, all these concepts are global. And so a fundamental a fundamental principle that I would like to impart is that everything is global. So how whatever we're teaching, how is it being viewed in other countries? How is it being shaped globally? And why is it in its form when it reaches our university? You can say that about testing, which has been shaped by global trends and global competition. You can say that about curriculum, which is the same, which has been shaped by different debates about learner-centeredness versus maybe a utilitarian, economically driven agenda. All of these issues are global issues. And if we do not present this type of content as a global issue, then our students are missing out and overlooking a very important part of what they're learning to be as teachers. And you know, another another thing that I'd like to say is that global issues might be controversial, and we might be looking at sensitive issues sometimes, but by making a discussion something that is open to all perspectives, then I think that's one way of addressing it. There were students from different countries, and there were also teachers who were dealing with international school curricula. They were also PGDE students. So I thought that they were very attuned to global perspectives. So I'm not surprised. And I think that even if a person, comes from a local school, they can become attuned to global issues and can cultivate a global perspective. So I'm not surprised because also in our discussions, they had a very good attitude about talking about their roles as teachers and very concerned also about global trends of, preparing students to become great test takers, maybe at the risk of not really looking at students as human beings. So they were very much in tune to the debates surrounding their roles as teachers in a global context.